Okay, so he begins about talking about the size and weight of Brachiosaur, Diplodocus, and Apatosaurus, also known as Brontosaurus. They just recently made that name change because back in the olden days, like the early 1900s, people were very competitive fossil collectors. So what really happened is that Apatosaurus and Brontosaurus were two names for the same animal, and since Apatosaurus was named first, they just assumed the name Apatosaurus. And then he goes on to talk about how, quote, many years ago, scientists speculated that sauropods spent most of the time in water to support their enormous weight, end quote. And then he goes on talking about how now scientists believe that sauropods were land-dwelling creatures because of their narrow feet, their narrow rib cage, and reinforced backbone. Not only that, is that also because of the advent of the idea of homeothermy in dinosaurs and the idea that they aren't just bumbling idiots who can't walk. That came out that came out as well. He then talks about how scientists believe that in the first few years of sauropods' life, they aged and grew very quickly. He then talks about how, quote, if dinosaurs lived hundreds of years as people did before the flood, they had plenty of time to develop into enormous creatures we find in fossil record, end quote. We also find baby sauropods, and also look at African elephants and whales. They are both very large creatures, and when they give birth, they are huge. For example, an African elephant is 200 pounds when it comes out, and it increases to 7 tons in 30 years. And a whale is even bigger when it comes out. I think so. I think that's right. I think they're bigger, and then they get even bigger. So this idea that you can have a huge amount of growth in a short time period is not new. And dinosaurs, especially sauropods, most likely did live for about 100 years. And it's on the argument about dinosaurs living hundreds of years, as the Bible makes no mention of that, so he's just putting words into the Bible's mouth. Next, he says, sauropods, or quote, sauropods just appear and disappear in the fossil record without connection, without explanations, end quote. And he then says, quote, no known process of change could derive them from any other known organism, and no evidence of such a change is found in the fossil record, end quote. These two claims are false. For example, there are the protosauropods, including Ankylosaurus, which is, I'll read a quote from the fossil book, A Record of Prehistoric Life. Quote, among the slender reptiles that ranged through eastern valleys was a heavier creature with stocky hind legs called Ankylosaurus. It had a small head, blunt teeth, and 5 toes on each foot, 4 being usable, and apparently could walk half erect or on all fours and ate plants as well as animals. While feeding, it may have waded into shallow swamps. This creature was Prosauropod, or first lizard foot. Prosauropods were very widespread group in late Triassic and early Jurassic, with specimens known from all continents except Antarctica. Plateosaurus from Germany, France, and Argentina was about 20 feet long and probably spent even more of its time on all 4 feet than Ankylosaurus, but it was still able to get about on its hind legs alone. End quote. So these are the sauropods, and because of their stocky hind legs and their mainly use of quadrupedalism, I think that's what it's called, when you walk on all 4 feet, and also the anatomy of the hind legs. This is they are the most likely descendants of sauropods, or the ancestors of sauropods, and you also get the Euskalosaurus, which was a length of 40 feet and weighed 2 tons. So the advent of sauropods is not like a finger snap. It wasn't just out of thin air, and so he doesn't have any research on that. I mean, he even quotes The Complete Dinosaur, which it's a book that I have, and it talks about prosauropods. So he must have just ignored that. And the quote that he provides here is bad. The quote he provides is, quote, the ancestries of sauropods before they burst onto the world scene on almost every continent in the middle of Jurassic is obscure, end quote. That doesn't say that they just popped into existence like creation. No, it's obscure. That doesn't mean that it didn't happen. I mean, we have these prosauropod skeletons, and I've also read some other things online about prosauropods. Next, he talks about Job. the Job and God's eyewitness account of Earth's history in the Bible and stuff like that. Okay, so on Job 40:15, as I believe other people pointed out, that's actually a mistranslation. Not even so much a mistranslation as I guess you could say a literary fig leaf. What tail is actually translated as is penis, and it also talks about his testicles. So it's not really his tail. It's talking about his penis being like a cedar tree, and that's kind of cool, I think. Next, he goes on to talk about how the Ark easily had room for dinosaurs, and then he goes about how there are only about 50 kinds. Okay, first of all, you have to define kind. No one can define kind. And whenever you come out with a definition of kind, it always ends up sounding like a genus or a species or something like that. I wrote up some calculations I did on one of my Answers in Genesis, or Answers in the AIG Project papers. I believe it was the one. It's on our website, Answers in Nature. It's freewebs.com/answersinnature. It's in the paleontology section. I'll just read off what I said. One question that creationists cannot answer is, what is the definition of a kind? Every time this question has been brought up, the definition is always similar to a scientific genus or species. For example, Ken Ham speaks of the dog kind. This is where a major problem arises. According to nomenclature zoologists online, there are approximately 3,400 discovered, or 340,000 discovered genera, I guess, in the world. The estimate as to the number of species ranges from 2 to 100 million. Now, this is where a major problem of space comes into play. There is no possible way the Ark could have held 680,000 to 200 million animals plus food for those animals. I just realized that calculation doesn't even include the 7 clean animals. It isn't just a problem of space, it's also a problem of weight. The largest ocean liner on Earth, the QMT Southampton, holds 1,300 crew members and 2,800 passengers, with food enough to feed them for the entire extent of the cruise. Now look at the Ark. It would have had to hold 640,000 to 200 million animals, not including the 7 clean animals, and food enough to feed them for a year, as well as Noah and his family and their food. It is statistically impossible. And on weight, each one of those frickin' sauropods weighs 80 tons. That's incredible. And even if there are only 40 or 50 kinds of dinosaurs, most of them were large. Like most of the theropod dinosaurs were large, and definitely most of the sauropod dinosaurs were large. Basically, what they're trying to get at, what they're doing a step dance around what they call microevolution. They claim to know that microevolution happens, but there's no delineation between microevolution and macroevolution. Microevolution leads to macroevolution. It's something that creationists made up so they can do a little tap dance around it. There's no difference between micro and macro. It's just fucking evolution. Okay, so that's my... Okay, well, I'll tell you his conclusion. Quote, while some scientists study sauropods and make evolutionary conclusions as to the origin and probable extinction of these majestic creatures, Christians must never compromise the clear teaching found in the history of the book of the universe. The Bible. End quote. Okay. Let me just make one thing. The Bible is not clear at all. The Bible talks in metaphors, parables. For example, the word Elohim in Genesis is plural. I think the Iranians might have it right on that. But scientists make evolutionary conclusions as to the origin and probable extinction of dinosaurs because that's what the evidence backs up. I mean, you have these prosauropods that are basically sauropods, except that they have a few different delineations and they existed before. So therefore, we have to come up with the conclusion that sauropods evolved from prosauropods. There's no way you can get around that. Additionally, I mean, you can't get around the idea that... I'm trying to find I always forget the name of this animal. But they're the animals that gave rise to both mammals and dinosaurs. I think they're called proto-mammals because that would make sense. Let's see here.